Ayo. Alright, so you read the title. You know what this is, but you may not know why this is. Let's talk. So when I go, when I used to search for guides back when, I was on a noob level, I would find people who just throw up videos of kills, not actually explain anything, find people who explain random mechanics that altogether are wholly inconsequential for the individual, and we didn't like that. So long story short, this is going to be a series. I'm going to do this for every boss, hopefully normal and heroic, see what happens, about basically how to heal some of these fights. I'm assuming that you've at least, you understand the mechanics of the fight. We're going to explain how each mechanic interacts with each other, how heals interact with each mechanic, but ultimately how to maximize your efficacy as a healer. This is not a guide on how to down the boss. If you're looking for one of those, I'm sorry. This is not going to help your raid down a boss, but this will help you, or perhaps your healers, maximize their performance. And after all, isn't that all anyone can ask? So I've taken the liberty of coming in here. Bosses are dead, obviously, but we're going to talk about what you need to do and what you first need to realize. Now, obviously, these guides are going to be aimed at 25 man. Okay, 25 man normal first. But that does not mean anything said in here can't be translated to perhaps 10 man or even looking for raid if needed. And I'll try to dip into some heroic mechanics, but I don't know the fight, and we'll likely do a separate guide just for that. First things first, there's going to be 4 dogs. Okay, 10 men looking for raid also only have 3 dogs, but that's not really important. What is important is that you're going to need 3 tanks. Step 1, you got to know your tanks, right? You got to know what people are taking damage. So step 1 on this fight is identifying the damage going out. First thing you'll notice, melee swings. There's a bit of a bleed that stacks on the tanks. Completely inconsequential. Does not need to be taunted. Nothing really too severe, but you do need to keep an eye out on the tanks. Okay, so step 1 as a healer, I'd say pretty much every spec, especially in 25 man, need to be watching the healers. Perhaps your raid will designate some set healers for this. If that's the case, go for it. Please do listen to your raid leader. But at this point, if I was saying I was perhaps a resto druid, keep a life bloom on one of them, perhaps a holy pally, beacon on one of them, eternal glory, sacred shield type thing on one of them, earth shield, shaman, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Just keep an eye on the tanks. They will get hit hard. At one point, one tank will be taking 2 dogs. This tank will definitely want to be your focus if you're healing the tanks. Definitely keep them healed up, keep them hotted up. I noticed alone just having a beacon on one tank was equatable to almost 15% of my overall healing. That's how much damage they take, and that's how much healing they need. They definitely need a set healer, and they definitely need a heal every global. All right, now that we're clear on that, that's a bit rudimentary, you may argue, and I would agree. What's more important here in the fight is knowing the bosses, knowing the dogs, and knowing their mechanics. Let's talk about, there's pretty much 2 types of things you need to worry about per dog. 4 dogs, they each have a mechanic that will do something you only need to look out for, and then they'll do something that basically just needs to be healed through it, okay? So let's look at that individually. Each dog has its own. That's not even close to the right one. Each dog has its own. The amethyst one is going to throw a pull down on the ground, okay? Now, as a healer, your job mostly is to just move out of this. I'm assuming your raid is intelligent enough to do the same. So as a healer, you don't really need to worry about these unless people are indeed standing in them. And if that is the fact, then yeah, good luck. Heal through them. It's gonna be interesting. And then ultimately, every dog shares this type of thing, but we'll discuss it individually. An overload. Okay, don't worry about why. As a healer, it's not your job. Your job is to deal with it. It's going to heal. It's going to do a good amount of damage. It says about 500. No, this is heroic. Probably, yeah, 250,000. That says a lot more likely. 250,000 damage before mitigation. So this is a good time to get ready to do some healing. Good time to do some reduction. As always, as a healer, I would coordinate what type of reduction you plan on doing. Perhaps if you're a druid, trank, obviously not reduction, but some type of reaction. Holy pal, you could devotion aura. Shaman could drop either totem. Any types of things like that, right? So a CD. Not necessarily mandatory though. Okay, so keep that in mind. But I would definitely recommend, if you're going to maximize your ability, definitely use something here, whether it's a throughput CD or a reduction CD. And this is the time, if you really want to eke out that extra healing, I would do a bit of pre-healing. Now, as a holy pally, you could stack a bit of mastery. Try to get mastery on as many people as possible. pre-heal with a flash of light, get ready to do some healing on the tanks. They're going to take damage. Pre-heal with the Holy Radiance. If you could time this right, this is going to be a time where there's going to be a lot of healing throughput needed. Okay, it's not going to kill anyone, but it's definitely good to stay ahead. Now we'll move on to the Cobalt Dog. Okay, it's going to be very similar. It's going to have the Overload, which is baseline. We'll talk about that on each one. But the Cobalt Mine is the one you need to deal with here. Okay, this time it's going to be a big blue ice thingy. Once again, as a healer, your sole job is just to move out of it. I'm assuming, once again, that everybody in your raid will also move out of it. If they do not, then you have a second job. Second job is to dispel them. Okay, that's right. They're going to get frozen, and they're not going to be able to move, and this is going to complicate the mechanics. Do not let them stay frozen. I understand in some cases it's like, oh, they're noobs, they stood there. They are, indeed, but do not let them stay frozen. It is your job as a healer to make sure everyone can move. There is already a damage or already a movement speed decrease happening throughout this fight, which is deadly in some cases, so you do not need to be worrying about people being frozen. So just go ahead and dispel them. Okay, not that big a deal. Then there's also going to be the explosion at the end, so go ahead and pre-heal as well. Jade Guardian, the green one, this one's going to do shards. Okay, this one's just going to fire shards off for all players. Okay, so this kind of got like 2 small explosions, one smaller one and then a moderate one later on. Can't really do much about this. This is just going to force you to AoE heal. This is not necessarily an AoE healing fight, but this dog is going to make you do it. Whether or not you like it, you will. So this is a good time to use AoE heals, perhaps Wild Growth. You can use some Holy Radiance. I would definitely recommend using some Light of Dawn, as it's going to happen kind of often. Okay, and you don't want to be in a position where you're running out of mana towards the end of this fight. I'll explain that in a second. But one way or the other, do some AoE healing, Renewing Mists, Wild Growth, Healing Rain, Chain Heal. I guess you're probably just casting that anyway if you're a shaman, but you know what I mean. Just throw out the AoE heals as needed, and then get ready for the explosion, because if that happens right after the Jade Shards, it's going to do a good amount of damage. This is definitely a time I would consider using Devotion Aura if you have not already. Same with Tranks. Perhaps any other options you have. Totem from the Shamans, a reduction from Renewing Mist or whatever it is from Monk. But, I mean, you got to react. This is going to be a good amount of damage. Once again, it's probably not going to kill anyone, but this is pretty much an active attrition type fight. You got to stay ahead. Okay, final dog. This one's the most important as a healer. Okay, this is the red dog, Jasper dog, whatever you want to call him. And boy, does this one have an interesting mechanic. It is called Jasper Chains. Now, this is kind of similar to other types of chain mechanics, but it's a bit different in the fact that the only way you can break it is by being apart. But while you're apart, you're taking damage. The more damage, the longer you're apart, the more damage you take, and it's going to increase. So basically, there's one way to deal with this and one way to deal with it alone. Don't deal with it. Okay? As a healer, if you see somebody taking it, they are fucked. Plain and simple. As a raid, you want to deal with it when the dog is active or whatever, so you're taking less damage from his abilities. But as a healer, get ready to heal these people. Okay? There is a lot of times. Once again, we're assuming the raid understands the actual mechanics to down the boss, but there are a lot of times where I've seen people get frozen, right before I said to dispel. This is why. If they get frozen with these chains and can't get to their partner, they're in trouble. It doesn't sound like it should be the cause of the death on this fight, but it will be. It will be. So this is a straight single target heal. 2 people are going to be taking the damage, if at all. I would definitely recommend your raid and you in general to encourage them to not break them, to just hold on to them until the Jasper phase, until it's a good time to break, right? And then this, if you haven't used your reduction, your CD, this is the time to use it. Say, there's 8 groups, 8 people with the chains. They're going to break it during the Jasper bit. Go ahead and pop Devotion Aura. This is going to keep them much healthier, going to keep your mana much reduced. I mean, this is, like I said, this could be deadly, okay? But one way or the other, just keep an eye on them. It's a very aware phase. You have to be aware of who has them, because at a moment's notice, somebody, like I said, could get stuck in a puddle. The 2 people could not realize they could not be next to each other. They could just move out apart. It's interesting. If you've done this fight, I'm sure you know. So you just gotta keep your eyes open for that. Overall, I would say this is not a very healing intensive fight. I would rank this probably a 6 or 7 out of 10 for healing intensiveness. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of mechanics that can go wrong and likely will go wrong, especially your first time in here, your first few times. Obviously on Heroic it's going to get a bit more complicated. There's the tiles, which I think it's best if we just avoid for now. A whole new component really. But as a healer, your job is very straightforward. Okay, now I've marked up this room for a specific reason. This is typically what you want to do on 25-man. You're going to have your main tank at blue taking 2 dogs. You're off, and then you're going to need 2 other tanks. You're going to need 1 on green and 1 on purple with the remaining 2 dogs separated. Okay, now, once again, this is not a strategy guide on the raid. Hopefully your tanks know what to do, but one way or the other, the reason I have a 4th mark back there at red is because when the amethyst starts filling up the room with the pools, you can just kite the dog through back to X, and then all the pools will be on the blue side, and there won't be any by X, and you won't have to worry about that on melee. Bit of a trick we found out, but as a healer, you need to be aware of this because the dogs are going to pass right through you, and there could be some mechanics or some people that are running around. So as a healer, I would recommend staying right in the middle of all these dogs. There's going to be dogs on purple and green, so you definitely need to keep that aware. I've done a little trick here where I've set myself up to be 30 yards. I can test this with Light's hammer, and you just roll around the room, make sure you're 30 yards from each, and this is perfect. So you're in range of every single person. As long as there's no crazy movement, you should pretty much never have to move. And the best thing about that is Light of Dawn could also heal pretty much everyone in the raid. Okay, once again, 30 yards. So as long as you're within 30 yards of everyone, everybody's getting heals. Shouldn't be a big deal, especially with druids. Monks, you guys can move if you need to. There's a good amount of healing that needs to be done on the move on this fight, especially when things start puddling up near you. Okay, as I said, the blue mechanic, definitely move out of that ice. You don't want to get frozen. I know even though as a healer, it's not your job to worry about being frozen like that, but if there is a chain on you, you're going to have to run to the melee if you're chained with a melee. One way or the other, like I said, there's a lot that can go wrong. Okay, so while I won't say this fight is a very challenging fight to heal, I will say this fight can escalate quickly, and if you do not stay ahead of the damage, you can be very, very, very surprised at the end. Tanks are going to take a lot of damage. Raid's going to take a lot of damage if they do mess up, but other than that, I hope to do this for every fight. Unfortunately, not the greatest example of what I want to do with this. Pretty straightforward fight healing-wise, but I would like to talk about maximization otherwise, so if you enjoyed, please let me know. As always, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. I always will be, so. And if you didn't like it, you can get fucked.